So I'm going to take us into one classroom, and I think some of what I'll share has threads that connect many of what some of us have already talked about today. So I'm going to take us into my I'm Lisa Martin. I'm a professor in women's and gender studies and chair of health and human services. And I am teaching a cross-listed course in both of those disciplines in social construction of mental illness. And so I am not a clinical person by any means, and instead we look at issues of gender and race and stigma and how mental illness is constructed and understood by society. And so my students, as part of this class, do a research project using Photo Voice, which is a participatory research action methodology, where they take a research question, namely, what is your community doing to support people with mental illness, or what is it doing that does not support mental illness? And they get to define community any way that they see fit, right? It is their community. And many of our students choose our campus as the community that they wish to explore in this project. And so I looked over data from the last 3 or 4 years of students who chose UM-Dearborn as their campus and mined their projects to see some of what themes have been pulled out. And so students who have chosen our campuses have really kind of talked about resources. So some of what Sarah shared with us, right? So identifying those who know about CAPS think that our resources are underutilized. They know themselves they aren't using the resources that they have. They know themselves it's not really well known. They look into it and they go, I didn't know we had all of that. They think it is stigmatized, right? They don't think that they're going to walk into CAPS, or that they know other students aren't going to walk into CAPS. And they worry about the accessibility of resources. Or so part of what they didn't know means that they think it wasn't well accessible. So they also, though, can think about their community. So they think that one of the strengths of what they talk about is that our campus is a source of community. And so they don't just talk about the stressors or the negatives that they see on campus, but they look at campus as a huge source of strength and community for them on our campus. And they talk about the ways that they're connected to one another, and that being a student really helps them forge new connections and new relationships that shore up that support as their students. And so those are some of the themes that emerge from their Photo Voice projects. And part of the Photo Voice methodology is not just in identifying negative kind of either problems or resources, but also what is that next action step? What would you take to the powers that be, the policymakers and those who make changes, and propose solutions? And so some of the solutions that they have identified over the years include, this is the first class where I've really thought about this, so I think maybe faculty should talk about this more in our classes. And it needs to go beyond just the syllabus. Like, yeah, maybe they did say something that first day in class, but I wasn't really stressed out the first day, and I don't remember it at the moment when I got stressed out, right? So they want us to go beyond the syllabus or beyond the Canvas course. And there's a difference between making something accessible on a piece of paper and feeling like it's accessible in the moment when you need it. And so that's one of the main themes. Some of the other resources include making things, knowing that the resources are available, talking to faculty, making students more aware, some of the peer support. So they really liked the idea of having peer support available to them, and just being more aware of the resources. So that idea of going beyond the syllabus, going beyond the website. I think they would be thrilled. Even in their wildest dreams, they did not know Therapy Dog was going to be an option. So I think that, like, when I go to class on Monday and tell them that, they're going to be thrilled beyond belief, right? So that's kind of the Photo Voice project in a nutshell. That was the first piece that I wanted to share. The second piece that I have done, and kind of thinking about through these community things, So I was really struck with the idea of, okay, we have to do more than just, thank you, dear, then, the other things were that the idea of, because of the stigma, that walking into CAPS, like, what do we do to make spaces more inviting, less clinical, waiting room? So they're really interesting because they both want it to be very private because of the stigma. They don't want people to see you walking in there, but yet that space looks kind of clinical and sterile, and I don't know if I want to go in there. And so, good luck. I don't know, it wants to be very inviting and lovely, but nobody can see me going in there. So that's always also fun. So I was thinking about their information, and so how do I then take it beyond my own syllabus? And so as I started to do this, I have a unit that I call my Radical Self-Care Week that I do the week before we move into midterms. So as the stress is ramping up into midterms, we take this day that, again, goes beyond self-care of, I'm not telling you to spend money and go take a bubble bath and go get a massage or whatever those things are. And we watch some videos by Alicia Garza and some other Black feminist leaders about trying to reclaim this kind of commercialized idea of what self-care movement is. But one of the simple things that I do on a regular basis is either 2-word check-ins or check-outs before and after class, where I just kind of get the classroom oriented to putting your phones away, and the rest of class is stressed, but like, we get this time together. So we use the check-ins as a device to seal the room and see where we all are. And so on this day, I did a 2-word check-in, and I generated a word cloud, and these are the words that the students shared: stressed, anxious, exhausted, stress, worried, unhappy, okay, overwhelmed, sleepy, tired, scared, sleeping, exhausted, so-so. So-so was about the most positive word that I got the entire day. Usually a couple of students want to make you feel good, and they'll kind of give you something good to go on. But that one day, I got not a single positive experience, to the point where that was probably a little shocking for me. Like, most students want to be stressed, and you'll feel that. But and I write them down. I always write down their check-ins because I kind of want to reflect on it and see where we're going to go. And so I looked at that list and I said, we didn't get a single one, you guys. You're all feeling pretty bad. So what are we going to do with this? And they said, can we cancel class? Can we cancel the midterm? And I said, we cannot. I was like, I knew you were going to ask, and the answer is no, right? So what else are we going to do? So what are the solutions beyond taking everything away? Because I know you're going to ask that. What else are we going to do? And so we started to, we can go to the next slide. So what are some of the things that we can do? So we do these check-ins so I get to see how people are doing. And sometimes I give them prompts or questions. Sometimes I let them not repeat each other. So if somebody's given a word, they have to come up with something else. Sometimes I get them to tell me something they're looking forward to, so it can't be doom and gloom. But we take the pulse, right? What we did on Radical Self-Care Week was we did a guided meditation, because sometimes I don't always feel so skilled to do them myself, but there are great guided meditations that you can have others help you walk through. So we did one on self-compassion, because we were getting ready to go into midterms, and sometimes what I feel students talk about the skills that they feel like they're beating themselves up, and they're so worked up about failure or not doing well on an exam. So we did this exercise on self-compassion, and we talked a lot about what if you do? What if you bomb the exam? What if you bomb the midterm? What if it doesn't go to plan, regardless of how much effort you put in studying and you prepped and it doesn't go well? And we talked about, what would you say if you're practicing self-compassion? And what would you do if it was not you who failed, but it was the person sitting next to you and they're telling you the story that they failed? What would you say to them? Would you be way more kind to them than the self-talk that you're giving? in your own head? And why is it easier to be kinder to someone else than it is to yourself? And then I said, and what do you think I'm thinking about you as I grade your exam? Do you think I'm judging you? What do you think I think of your poor effort on the exam? And they shared things like, well, you think I'm worthless, or you think I'm a terrible student. And I said, here's what I think. Oh, they had a bad experience on that exam. Yeah. I don't think anything about your value as a person. I don't think anything about your ability to excel as a student. And I definitely don't think it says anything about whether or not you belong at this university and your ability to succeed here. And I was like, has anybody ever spoken to you about your worthiness as a student and whether you belong here before you go into midterms? And they said, no. Why would anybody do that? And I said, well, then now they have. And maybe we should think about that, right? Like, your performance on an exam is how you performed in one moment in time. And that is all that it is. And it is not necessarily even a reflection of how much you're going to learn in this class, right? It's one measure. And so part of that is how we give our students support, right? We have to take assessments. We have these learning opportunities, and we can take different types of assessments, right? And we can have different types of learning. But what support looks like can change. And so some of the students talked about, like in the midterm they were about to take for me, it's a writing class, it's a writing intensive class. So it's an essay exam. They've literally had the question since the first day of class. They open Canvas and I say, the midterm is up there. You can start working on it whenever you want, right? Many of them, before the midterms due, haven't looked at the midterm yet. So they said, well, I know you said it was there the first day, but I'm like really anxious and I haven't looked at it yet. And I said, well, we can take care of that when we open the exam and we read it together, right? Like, now you've looked at it, so it's not so scary. So we also talked about how many of you are to-do list makers, right? And I had a lot of list makers in the class. And I said, and how many of you end your day by making your to-do list for tomorrow? And a bunch of them raised their hand. And I said, so we're going to stop that. And I said, instead of ending your day thinking about all the stress you have to do tomorrow, we're going to start ending the day by making a list of today's accomplishments. Because even if you didn't get done everything you wanted to do today, you got something done. Even if it was you got dressed, you went to class, you tied your shoes, you made yourself lunch. I don't care what it is, you accomplished something today. And tomorrow's list can be the first thing you do tomorrow, right? So we started that practice of coming up with accomplishments. And I was talking to a student yesterday. I interviewed a student for a research assistant job from my class. And one of my other colleagues asked them, well, what do you do to keep yourself organized? And she said, unprompted by me, at the end of the day, I make a list of all my accomplishments. And I just said nothing, but I was really proud to hear that, because she was one of my list makers in class earlier in the semester. And then the final thing I'll say is that we talked about emotions in that class, and we talked about stress, and we talked about the difference between stress and overwhelm and difficult conversations and vulnerability. And we talked a little bit about learning and discomfort. And something else that I think we need to talk about is we talked about how learning requires students to be uncomfortable, right? How a little bit, Caleb, you alluded to this, about how that discomfort of growth can be with you forever, even if the learning didn't go to plan, right? And that we require that vulnerability. So class is a safe space not to not be uncomfortable. It's a safe place to be uncomfortable. That is our goal as educators. And so being explicit about that with students is another, I think, big part of how we help them grow with that discomfort.